probably 50% of new depositing customers will only have one active player day inside their first week. You know, if you looked across the board with lots of brands. So you need to be able to make those predictions of a customer segment and their future value on day one, on session one, so that you're able to start tailoring their experience from that point onwards. So that's a key part of what we do with more the custom model build and segmentation side, is allow us to make predictions on a customer's value based on their first session, and then start bringing those customers into guided journeys based on what they require as an individual for their segment.
Hello and welcome to Connected, an interview series from Pragmatic Solutions where we feature some of the top suppliers in the iGaming industry who are integrated to the Pragmatic Solutions platform or our data lake. And today is a great day. We're talking with Jerry Murray, co-founder of data analysis and iGaming insights provider Cyclical. Jerry, good to see you.
Hi Ashley, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for coming on to Connected.
No problem.
You and I have known each other for a while and worked together through a number of projects, several of which here at Pragmatic are for our licensee customers, where you've been able to, from my perspective, what I see is really help improve their business understanding first of the KPIs that are the key business drivers in their business, and then build strategies as to how to improve those metrics. I know that's only part of what you guys do, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you more about it, and making sure that more of the industry is aware of the value that you can bring to the operator. So, Jerry, why don't you put in your own words, introduce your company, please.
So my company is a business called Cyclical, which we formed 6 years ago, myself and my business partner, a guy called Matt Booth. And our background is we'd worked very closely together at a UK online casino business. Some of you might be familiar with 32 Reds. That's where we met. He at the time was the chief commercial officer there, and he actually appointed me, and I was running a media agency at the time, who he brought in to look after new customer acquisition for that brand. And eventually I ended up running the brand and acquisition team for that business, and it went on a very successful growth path, eventually selling to Kindred. And when that sale went through, Matt and I sat down and went, look, we feel we've developed a good way of working, a good process to be able to successfully grow betting and gaming businesses. And we think we've got something to offer out to the market. So we set up Cyclical, as I said, 6 years ago. And we've been working successfully since that time with a number of operators, but increasingly now as well with media business as well. And effectively, it works in two ways. We'll help them try to better understand which audiences that they want to build engagement and relationships with, right? And that can work as a media owner side, but also with betting and gaming operators. And effectively what that looks at is custom segmentations. It will look at predictive models that they may be able to build to understand who the right customers they should be prioritizing should be. And then also what we'll do on more the consultancy side of our business is we'll start to work with them on what are the tactics they should employ to try and build that engagement with those customers. So that could be putting together communication plans and journeys. It could be looking at the development of what offer and promotional strategies they need to put into place. But it also will look at things like maybe where their product is misaligned with the audience that's driving their revenues. And so, yeah, we've got a data side, but also a more traditional consultancy side of the business as well.
What I think is really interesting about your experience between you and your partner Matt is that you've covered both the media side, so you understand the acquisition funnel and the media market,
yep,
and which is where the investment goes from the operator, and the ROI side of it. So what's happening with that traffic and how to maximize the yield from it. Whereas often I think consultancies will sit on one side or the other of that equation, where they'll either assist you with media buying and understanding, what's the right sources of traffic, but then hand off to an internal team or an alternate party to extract the value from those customers. And from my experience, you guys have got a really good bridge. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
100%. I mean, that's at the heart of what we're trying to do. Effectively, we're trying to use first-party data from operators to understand who is the audience that is driving their business, really trying to drill down into who they want to build relationships with, and then in the ideal world, you can link that back to the acquisition sources that have a higher likelihood to bring those type of customers in, and you can join that all together so that you've got a nice self-fulfilling funnel, basically fueling your business with the types of customers that are going to drive you success. So that's what we're aiming to do.
So do you have these services packaged as modules that you customers can commission with you, like distinct bodies of work to come in and do an analysis, or how do you package your products and services?
Yeah, so the core sort of gateway really for everything that we do is what we call a life cycle health check. So that's the first starting position. And I think what works quite well for that is if a client comes to us with a specific challenge that they're trying to address, then we're able to dig into that by looking at their data. But also the process that we work through, quite often we'll have clients come to us and say, look, they're struggling to unlock the next level of growth, but they don't know why, right? So they don't necessarily know what the problem is. And by going through this lifecycle health check, we're able to help them understand maybe where they're having some challenges or where they have opportunities. And how that works is that we will work through accessing their first party data. So as you'll know from the work that we've done together with Pragmatic clients, we can build that. We're connected into your data lake, so we're able to extract the data in the format that we want to look at it. It's a proprietary process that we've got. And then we've got a set of core KPIs which we believe are the key indicators of whether a business is healthy or not. And we'll be looking at that very closely on the new acquisition funnel. You mentioned, a few minutes ago, businesses are spending an awful lot of money bringing customers to their front door, and they will succeed or they will fail based on their ability to build early engagement with those customers. So we take a very close look at that. And then the second area we'll look at is, once we've defined who the segments and audiences that they are driving their revenue, their most loyal customers are, we'll look at how successfully they're retaining and building engagement with those customers over time as well. So that's more their active customer base rather than necessarily the new players. But I think the other area that we really actively look at, and we always encourage our clients to allow us to work with them on as well, is we actually play the product. Because quite often what you can do is you can go back with quite a bland representation of, here's your KPIs, this is maybe where you're underperforming or overperforming versus the market, but you can't provide the context for it of maybe where a customer is hitting a barrier because of a poor communication journey or a poor journey on site. And so doing that user testing aligned with the data analysis is sort of what brings that really to life.
What I've seen you do effectively as well is to help prioritize the multiple areas that you could possibly put some attention to improve the business, but help an operator not only identify KPIs that are maybe below the industry benchmark levels, but also prioritize the most high leverage first areas to focus on that would deliver the most immediate value. I think focus is often a big challenge because there's so many moving parts in an industry like ours. And part of the insight value you provide is not just knowing what your benchmark current KPI statistic is, what KPIs to look at in the first place, how they compare to what the potential is that they could be, but also how to prioritize the actions in your business week that are going to have the most meaningful result at the end of the quarter. It's really interesting what you guys do. And so you mentioned about connection to the data lake. So what sort of reliance do you have with in order to provide your service to a customer? What do you need to extract from, what kind of data do you need from the business?
Well, this is where we've got a set process that we would work with, and a lot of the key touch points that we've got are fairly standard transactional elements that a customer will go through. So if you take the early life, we would be looking at aspects like the acquisition source that a customer has come from. You would be looking at their first depositing and their first session behavior, the first games that they play, whether customers are making multiple deposits, whether customers are opting into marketing communication. So you build up a picture of what a customer is doing in their first day. And ideally, if we can add to that as well, any unique elements of engagement that a brand can build to bring to life as well, that tends to be the secret sauce, right? So a great example of that would be, we could do the exercise for two sportsbook brands, and one, let's take some UK examples. You would have a standard sportsbook who might acquire a customer who makes a large first deposit, and looks like a high value customer, and they can go on to place multiple bets on the first day, and the behavior they're showing is high value betting behavior. So that's great. But then we've done some work in the past with Betfair as an example, and if you look at their business, they might acquire a customer who exhibits exactly the same behavior, but if that customer goes on and places a lay bet on the exchange, a unique product that only they can offer, they now know that customer is theirs, because that customer can't perform that action anywhere else. So trying to add in generic high value betting behavior, but also then looking for, okay, what are the unique elements that your brand can bring to life that will give you an indication that customer is likely to come back in the future, is really important, because it's that element then that starts to allow you to say, that's a customer I need to prioritize, right, with all of my marketing communications, my journey. That's a customer I need to invest bonus funds into. So there's a couple of elements to it that we would look to pick up: generic transactional behavior, but ideally including some unique elements that each brand holds as well.
Well, if you're working with a pragmatic solutions operator, you're going to benefit from your existing work you've done to connect to our data lake to get that data.
Yeah.
But if an operator is hearing about the potential you guys can bring in analyzing their business and deriving some insights that can help improve their yield, they also needn't worry about the structure that data is in, because part of what you'll do is you'll structure it for your own usage and enable you to run the models that you do, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Look, when you're working with a new business, everyone structures their data differently. Everybody has different platforms. Sometimes they own their own technology. So there is an additional step that we would have to go through, say, in comparison to a customer who has the pragmatic platform, because of it being the first time that we have to develop it. But we've mitigated a lot of that by, creating pre-written SQL code, say, for them to be able to go in and query the database that they have in the format that we would require it. So we have everything packaged and templated to try and reduce that time down as much as possible. So look, it's an additional step, but it's certainly not one that's insurmountable.
Okay, so what are the key problems that you're most often tasked with trying to solve for iGaming customers? Yeah,
so I think they tend to fall into three areas. The first challenge that we've got really for iGaming businesses is they want to improve their acquisition efficiency. How can I spend my marketing money more effectively? And you touched on that with the earlier question when we were talking about it. That's about how we can identify the customer segments that are driving value, and looking to try and link them back to the acquisition source that drove them. And I think the important thing that we try to do is what we mentioned earlier, is bridge that gap between an acquisition team bringing traffic to the door and then handing the customer over to a retention team and a product team to say, right, now make money out of those for me. What we want to try and do is make sure that we create alignment with the KPIs to say, we know we have an audience that is really loyal to this brand and that is driving all of your revenue long term. We can look at the behaviors that drive that value so that we can build journeys and onboarding journeys for those customers in early life, and then we can link them back to the acquisition sources that are more likely to bring those customers in, so that we have that harmonious cycle driving through. And that's I think probably the biggest challenge we tend to work with brands on, is that early life value drive of the customer, and then the ability to make their acquisition spend more effective. The second one I'd say that we tend to focus on most of area is prediction, right? So once a customer's brought into a business, one of the key challenges is that a lot of operators will take quite a long time before they will make some value prediction or place a customer in a segment that will allow them to focus on them. And if you look at the industry as a standard, probably 50% of new depositing customers will only have one active player day inside their first week. If you looked across the board with lots of brands. So you need to be able to make those predictions of a customer segment and their future value on day one, on session one, so that you're able to start tailoring their experience from that point onwards. So that's a key part of what we do with more the custom model build and segmentation side, is allow us to make predictions on a customer's value based on their first session, and then start bringing those customers into guided journeys based on what they require as an individual for their segment.
So to make a prediction as early, you're going to look at a lot of data points in that session: acquisition source, time of day, maybe some profile information about the customer, geolocation, things like that. And also what their behavior is: value of first deposit, games played, stake limits on those games. reaction with bonus. I think something you mentioned to me in one of the conversations I overheard you having with one of our customers when we did one of our introductory calls was looking at profiling the customer behavior in the usage of the bonus. And I think what was really interesting for me about what you said was not to prejudice a customer who receives a bonus and meets the wagering requirements and withdraws it as if they weren't entitled to, but just to understand that customer is inclined to that sort of behavior versus a customer who will use the winnings from their bonus to extend their play. Yeah. And that you might design different bonusing strategies for those two different types of customer, not one necessarily being better or worse than the other. It's just understanding that might have you allocate your bonus budget differently.
Yeah, 100%. I think you've just got to try and understand that you're going to have different customer behaviours when you're bringing in mass acquisition, which a lot of brands will be doing across the sector. And so some customers, they are going to need the fuel of a bonus to drive activity and engagement. And there's nothing wrong with that, as you said, in certain instances. But as long as you're aware of that and you're sort of accounting for that in the value that you give back to those customers. Whereas some other customers don't always require bonuses to be able to play. And if you understand those dynamics well, it allows you to more effectively allocate your bonus funds, which is, after you say you spend most of your money on bringing customers to the front door, then the second biggest area we work with on brands now is how they can effectively manage their bonus funds, right? Where should I be spending it, and who should I be spending it on?
What I take away from the interactions we've had and the services you've been providing to customers at Pragmatic Solutions platform is the role that we play as the platform is not to, there's service providers like you that are providing the insights that are derived from the data and advising programmatically on what is the next best offer or what's the next best action on this customer account. And we want to enable you to be able to get the data you need to extract those insights and send an event or a cohort or some message back to the platform. And our role is really being able to orchestrate and implement the desired action that your algorithm or your model prescribes. And that may be different very dynamically. The cohort may be a cohort of one or of many, and that may change dynamically. So I think it's a really good interplay between what we look to do in the platform in terms of core operational functionality and how you guys can leverage real-time data or near real-time data from the data lake, provide an inference and insight, and send events back to a platform to allow the operator to maximize the potential, not only value, but let's say the quality of experience for each customer. I mean, ultimately value is a reflection of the customer's enjoyment. If the more they're enjoying and their experience with a brand, the more they're going to invest in playing there, and the more value there will be. We talked about the Betfair example. Is there another recent success story that you might want to highlight?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of two different ones actually. I'd say that might be interesting. So we work with a UK business, Softer Gaming brand, who've only recently launched into the UK market in the last couple of years, and they came to us. Their challenge was essentially that they plateaued in their growth. They established themselves into the market, but they were struggling to be able to kick on and find that next level of growth. So the journey we took them on was starting with the life cycle health check. So we went through the process of extracting all of their data, and what we were able to find with them was that they had a really strong loyal core audience that was driving all of their revenue and their business. But actually from the user testing that we did, you started to realize that was misaligned to their acquisition marketing strategy. So they weren't necessarily going out looking and spending their money to try and bring in customers of that same profile. And if you looked at the onboarding journeys, they weren't necessarily developed for the behaviors that were right for those customers as well. So we went through a process of overhauling that with them. And it even went as far as actually on the consultancy side of the business, we managed a competitive pitch process for them to find a new media agency as well to be able to go out and execute the strategy that they needed. And now 18 months on, they're a business that's doubled in size, right, in terms of their scale. And they're also able to now effectively spend probably 75% more a month on acquisition marketing at a better ROI, and the business has never been healthier. So I think that's a really good example of us trying to bridge that gap between understanding who the right audience profile you need to bring in, and then making sure that that's aligned to your acquisition team, rather than just giving blunt CPA targets or volume targets for an acquisition team to bring in. So I think that's a good one. I'd say the second one, it's very different in terms of profile, is we're doing a lot of work increasingly now in the Brazilian market, and it's been really interesting over the last sort of 12 months. We've been doing work there for the last few years, but last 12 months in particular, as everyone has geared up for regulation.
Right.
And I think what's useful again about sort of the process that we go through with the Lifecycle Health Check product is that when the market regulated on 1st of January, you've basically got all KPIs reset because you have a completely different dynamic in the market. So being able to provide clients with the visibility of going, okay, this is what's changing in your business, this is what you need to worry about and be concerned about, these measures are fine, that's just natural and a normal process of moving from a non-regulated to regulated market environment, and this is now what we need to prioritise as I think been really successful. And we've got a brand we're working with there who've really successfully navigated that change. Business has again sort of doubled in the last 6 months, and they're in a really strong position in probably the most exciting market now globally for betting and gaming. So
and in your second example, it would be not just about inside the business, but also on their acquisition, renegotiating the terms with their affiliates, perhaps because of the realities of the difference in conversion in the regulated market versus previously.
Absolutely. I think the Brazilian market is really interesting because, for anyone who's listening who's worked in that market, it's an area where a lot of brands are acquiring customers at mass scale, right? So they're bringing in huge volumes of new customers on a monthly basis. And when you work in that way, the ability to be able to very quickly identify now where you should focus your attention and your bonus funds on day one is critical, because you cannot run a huge mass scale acquisition approach and then give everybody the same experience and the same level of generosity from day one afterwards. Otherwise you're going to be hugely inefficient in your bonus funds. So being able to very quickly drill down that and use the predictive nature of the models that we build really helps clients in improving their efficiency and focusing their attention on where it needs to be.
So delivering that kind of value for a customer, I guess it's a journey, right? I mean, it starts out with getting to know the business, getting underneath the hood a bit, looking at the data, prioritizing the low-hanging fruit opportunities to make some improvements. You must value a long-term relationship with an operator then, or a two-way street. They must value a long-term relationship with what you guys do, because some of these strategies some of them are maybe immediately implementable, and some of them may take some time to audit the early results and tune the strategy that's being applied. How do you work with your clients? What's your relationship with the operator long-term? How integrated with their team? How does it work?
Yeah, so typically what we would do is, as I said, that the starting point is this audit lifecycle health check that we conduct, and that's always like the gateway into the relationships that when we work with a client. And typically that would be a one-off project, and from that we would come back, I think as you've seen examples of this, we'll come back with a set of recommendations to a brand to say, look, this is where we think the biggest commercial upside is for you, these are the projects that you should prioritize. And let's say there's a list of 10 outcomes that we would suggest for a brand. 5 of them might not be anything that we need to be involved in at all. They're just initiatives that their business can take forward and run with their own department and benefit from at that stage. There may, of course, be areas where we feel we can support either with custom segmentation build or model capability if they have that lacking within their business, and that then tends to be a licensed product that they can develop with them and they can plug into their business, or there might be more consultancy based activity that we would run. So that would then lead to usually a retained relationship where we work with clients over the long haul. Like, so I mentioned, Matt and myself, we originally started this business off the back of 32 Red selling to Kindred. We've been working with that business since day one, and we still work with them today, right? So we continue to work with them on a consultancy basis and have done for over 6 years, and we enter into a lot of long-term relationships where we're continuously reassessing performance. It's a cyclical is because it's a cycle. We need to
clues in the name.
Yeah, clues in the name. We need to drop back in and see how the performance is improving, and then we will always find the next area of improvement that we can look to push on and help a business grow via.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much. Jerry Murray, your partner Matt Booth. The company is Cyclical. We have good experience working with them here at Pragmatic Solutions, and they've delivered results for our customers. Jerry, we'll make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you guys, and links to your website and everything are included outside the video. Thank you very much for talking with us today. We really look forward to doing more with you guys. And I encourage anyone who's heard what you've had to say to reach out and talk with you more, because I think we've just touched the tips of the waves here in my experience in working with you guys.
Great.
Thanks so much, and thank you all for watching.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. Cheers.